Now, before you start wondering why there is talk of politics on a video game channel, it's important to realize that all these things are interconnected and can be affected one way or the other. Now, most people will argue that war and geopolitics often feel disconnected from gaming, which I believe in, but games are part of a global tech and entertainment economy. And conflict ripples into energy, it ripples into technology, into shipping, into cybersecurity, consumer spending, into a variety of different facets of our society that you may not necessarily be able to discern in day-to-day operations and day-to-day life. But in actuality, all these things can be affected by a conflict that isn't even on our borders, including video games. So let's start by addressing the global conflict and how this in turn affects the global economy as a whole. Wars increase market uncertainty. You don't know what necessarily could happen, what could transpire due to variations in availability of different products and natural resources that we acquire from partnerships from other countries. Government shift spending towards defense as opposed to maintaining the infrastructure and security of the country. And investors, they can become cautious. Why would you want to invest in a country who is actively involved in a conflict with another country? Now, does that mean that these investors are completely deterred due to the fact that we're in wartime? No, it doesn't, because these people want their money at the end of the day, so they're going to go for it and consider it. I'm just saying that if that the fact that we are in war, that affects their decision making, and they just become more reserved as opposed to just jumping into that deal when we aren't in wartime. And you could see how this in turn could affect industries outside of just normal day-to-day life, like groceries and maybe fitness, healthcare. It could trickle down. It could affect things even as seemingly inconsequential as video games. Entertainment industries as well, they often feel this through slower spending and through layoffs. Now let's talk about oil prices, fuel, and gas. Some of you may already be experiencing increases in what it costs to fill up your tank as you go to the gas station because we are in wartime right now. There's this important body of water in Iran called the Strait of Hormuz, and it's one of the most important places in which we source oil on the entire planet. I think it's something like 20%. It could be larger, it could be fewer, but I know it's definitely a chunk of a percentage of the world's oil is sourced from that strait, from that body of water. And now that Iran is in wartime, especially with our country, United States, I don't know where the rest of you are at, but for majority of people who watch me, they're in the United States. The fact that we are in wartime, that only exacerbates our accessibility to achieve the oil that they have the access to. And Iran has essentially monopolized the control and the access of this strait, because there are other countries who are supposed to have access to it, but Iran is pretty much that country that's like, okay, we're here near the Strait of Hormuz. These other countries want access to the oil who are in closer proximity to Iran than the United States is. So they're more than likely trying to access it, but Iran is like, nope, they've monopolized the access to it. And now that we are in direct conflict with them, our access to that oil has been limited, which means that the oil that is in circulation or is available to us, it becomes more of a prized commodity because it's rare now. It's far and few between, meaning what? That prices will increase. And that's why you're going to be shitting, quite frankly, when you go to the pump to fill up your tank. Now, due to that body of water being potentially blocked or having the access to it threatened, as I just mentioned, the oil prices increase, gas prices rise globally, but this means that there's less disposable income for people to use to purchase things that they may or may not even need. Video games, we don't need them, but we sure do love them, especially on this side of the internet. So more money directed towards essentials is more money that cannot be directed towards non-essentials, meaning this increase in gas prices, this war that's going on, will not only directly increase the prices of video games, but it will decrease the amount of money that you have to spend on those video games. So you're burning the candle at two different ends. So video games as a whole, the consumer spending on these games is going to take a hit because video games is highly dependent upon discretionary spending. When gas, groceries, and housing increases, you're going to have fewer new game purchases, fewer microtransactions, you're going to have fewer new consoles. Even big releases can feel the weight of this during economic collapse and instability because of this war. Let's talk about actual hardware and supply chains. So games depend on global manufacturing. Consoles, GPUs, chips, hardware, all of these things, they come into the United States through international shipping routes. That's why there's this talk of a shortage of all these chips and supplies, because all that stuff is not sourced here in the United States. PlayStation is owned by, that's a Japanese company. You know, we acquire these stuff via partnerships from other countries and other places. The conflict that's going on now, that can cause shipping delays, that can cause higher transportation costs, and it can cause supply shortages, which we are experiencing right now. Hardware prices will eventually increase, and that will affect the gaming ecosystem as a whole. This next effect that modern conflicts have on gaming might be a little bit of a reach, but I do think it's feasible and it's something that you should consider. And that's that modern conflicts, they can involve cyber attacks, because I think that when there are certain things that are going on, you could have these wartime countries and they could target large corporations, specifically tech companies. Our infrastructures are large online platforms, and gaming companies, they run massive online servers and player data and live service games. And I think all this stuff is potentially up for grabs, or at least could be classified as collateral damage when it comes to these two countries attacking each other via proxy. War is not always conducted by lining up and killing each other and just shooting each other with guns and things of that nature. I think it takes on more of a far discreet turn nowadays. Obviously not right now because of the actual bombing and fighting, but I think leading up to this point, war has been done by intelligence, by proxy, by espionage, by things of that nature. And these countries, attacking these large corporations could potentially be a downside as well of this war and how it's affecting the video game industry. Now, another part that could be affected is cultural influences. I've spoken about this and alluded to this a lot on this channel, that games are reflective of real world representations, and things in video games can be symbolic of things that are occurring in the real world. And I think that this war can serve as fuel for game narratives, for military shooters, for political storytelling, potential pushing of certain agendas. Historically, we've seen wars influence Call of Duty narratives, political themes in RPGs, dystopian world building. So even though what's happening right now is incredibly disheartening and something that I would never promote, you could potentially see this represented in future gaming titles years down the line after this conflict resolves. Aside from narrative influence, this could also influence player behavior. A lot of people may want to partake more in shooter games, which I wouldn't advise to be your reasoning for wanting to play a shooter game to come from an actual real life war, but you may see that. They may take more of an interest in military games, of strategy games, geopolitical games, games that include governmental factions and things of that nature. But it can also spark ethical debates about how games can portray war and how that probably is not the correct medium for these things to be portrayed in. So that could arise certain debate topics and certain contraindications and certain arguments that people may have amongst one another. Another effect that this war can have on games is that the global markets and regional access, they might be hit one of the hardest, because conflicts can lead to sanctions, they can lead to internet restrictions, they can lead to payment limitations. This can affect digital storefront purchases, this can affect multiplayer connectivity, this could affect regional game launches, because obviously there are countries in war, so it may not launch in that particular area or that particular setting. So all these things can be indirectly impacted by the fact that we're just in war right now. I think one thing I would like people to realize and to take away from this video is that games, the big picture essentially is that games, they aren't isolated from the outside world. There are reasons why the saying everything is a remix exists, or that a lot of things draw inspiration from particular things. And it's because games can mirror and they can reflect the things that we go through in our everyday lives and things that we encounter just by virtue of being alive. Games, they sit at the intersection of technology, economics, culture, geopolitics, all sorts of aspects and facets of life, and they can serve as a medium to portray these things to wider demographics of people and larger audiences. This isn't just something that can be shunned or ignored. You know, I get it, man. War may seem that it's a far stretch and it's unrelated to gaming, but global conflicts, they reshape the systems that allow games to even exist in the first place. Energy prices, technology, supply chains, global economies, even the stories developers choose to tell, all this can be influenced by what is going on right now. Video games don't just exist inside worlds, they are shaped by the one that we currently live in. I'm Harlem, thank you for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.